Good morning. This is Angeline with the Center for Rural Affairs. I'm happy to present Léa Vereecke. She's an organic consultant based in Colorado, and she works for the Rodale Institute and will be presenting on transitioning to organic.
All right, thank you, Angeline. I will be sharing my screen. Hi, everybody. So as Angeline said, my name is Léa and I work for the Rodale Institute. This presentation that we are recording now is going to be pretty high level, pretty introductory level, I would say, for organic transition and the nitty-gritty details of how it works and what the things are what is gonna change on your farm as you transition to organic. So if you are looking for more advanced content, that might not be the best presentation for you, but you're also welcome to watch it. Anyway, you can increase the speed of the presentation and that makes it more digestible as well. So transitioning your operation, production timeline, and consideration is the name of that presentation. And I will be talking in more details about what it means that I am an organic consultant. So first, I like to start with this quote. The main barrier was believing that it would work. The biggest change is between your ears. I really like it. It comes from a farmer in Ontario. This was a survey done by an organization in Ontario looking at the barriers to organic certification. And so this farmer, who is a crop and dairy farmer, thought that the hardest hurdle, the hardest piece to get over was the sod change and how your sod process has to change, how you have to just really hit the reset button and go back to a fully new way of thinking about your farm and your farming systems. So keeping that in mind, the practical, technical details, it's a learning curve, but the mind shift is going to be a really big part of transitioning to organic. To some of the details of organic. So what is organic certification? To like straighten it up with what the roles are, who plays a role in your organic certification. This is a little like bigger picture slide of the process. So note here, this is not an endorsement by Rodale, nor the list is exhaustive. That refers to the accredited certifying bodies that are listed here. So you can see 4 of them here. First of all, the first step or the first actor in organic certification is the USDA, which administers the organic program, the organic seal. This like rules who can be called organic, who can call themselves organic, who can use the organic seal. And that is the National Organic Program within USDA. That's where all the rules are. They're available to anybody, readable. If you have any questions specific to the rules, you can always look at that CFR 7 part 205 and search for any kind of specific information you would like. So USDA, again, administers the rule, decides what the rules are. Then there are accredited certifying bodies or certifying agents. They're accredited by the USDA to enforce, to make sure the rules are enforced. So some of them are independent organizations, just like OCIA International, Oregon Tilth, and some of them are states administered. So usually under the Department of Ag, some states have certifying bodies that can act and decide whether or not a farm can be organic. So for example, here, Iowa Department of Ag has a branch that does and is accredited by the USDA to administer the organic program. Same for the Colorado Department of Ag. The next step is the inspectors. So some of them are employed by those certifying bodies, and some of them are independent inspector who contract with the certifying body. It doesn't really matter who employs them, if they're self-employed or employed by the certifier directly. Their role is the same, and their role is to go, so step number 1 here, to go to your farm and inspect. They're going to come, they know all the rules, they know your operation. You will have to submit something that describes your operation. We can go into more details into that later. They come to your farm and they make sure that all the things you said, according to the rule of the National Organic Programs, are accurate. They're going to do a bunch of like mass balance with financial to make sure that everything adds up in the numbers. They're going to look around And then they're going to write a report, step 2 here, and they're going to send a report back to the certifier. And the certifier has reviewers that are not inspectors. So if you're an inspector, you cannot be a reviewer. So this is a separation here that makes sure that the inspector cannot be biased by their relationship with the farmer. The person who reviews the report has never met the farmer. So there cannot be any bribing whatsoever. The reviewer reviews the inspector's very detailed report on what they saw on the farm. And step number 3 here in the center, they then send a notice to the farmer telling them whether they are certified or not certified. So that's kind of the whole process and how like all the entities kind of interact with one another. Next slide. Okay, so to summarize it, there are 5 steps to certification broadly. So complete an application. That means you decide you want to be organic. So you submit an application to a certifier, just letting them know, hey, I exist and I intend to certify my operation organic. Then they will send you a bunch of paper that you will have to fill. And that paperwork mostly is called the organic system plan, which is all that your farm does and description of all the little things that will make you or not make you organic. So there will be like, what parcels are you going to have? Are you going to want to be organic? What type of equipment do you use? What the size of those parcels are? You're going to have a lot of details on that on your operation in that organic system plan, as short OSP. It's your roadmap. It's like every year you're going to have to resubmit it, add all the little tweaks you have made on your operation. So you submit that, the inspector, as we talked about already, reads it and then comes to your farm knowing all those things that you've written in it. They write that evaluation and inspection report, and then a certification decision is made, as we already went over. One thing that I get asked a lot is, how do I choose my certifier? I had listed a few of them. Again, we're not endorsing them, but I had listed Oregon Tilth, for example. I had listed Colorado Department of Ag. There's so many more. There is MOSA, there is OFA, there is QCS. I can't even list them all. There are just really, really many certification agencies, which can make it a little overwhelming to choose one. So one thing that I like to say is that there is a few considerations you can have in mind. So the fee structure, and I'm going to go into more details on that, is something that you can keep in mind. But from my experience, it doesn't vary very much between certifiers. They tend to be roughly at the same cost. Some of them, I would say maybe some of the State Department of Ag administered program might be a little cheaper than the standalone organizations. But usually like it's a little consideration in the decision-making process. I think the area of expertise of the certifier is very important. So there are some like very large certifiers that you might have heard of. CCOF, for example, like a lot of produce you buy at the store is going to be, it's going to be written on certified organic by CCOF, which means California Certified Organic Farmers. So it's a very large certifier that has California in the name, but also operates across the entire country. It's the same for Oregon Tilth. So the State Department of Ag are the only certifiers that only operate in their state. Any other certifier usually has branched out to operate in any state and sometimes worldwide, even if there is the name of the state in the certifier's name, which can make it a little bit confusing. I will give you that much. But so the area of expertise is a good thing. And here, what I'm showing on the map here is the organic farm search tool. So it's on the Rodale website. It pulls information from a website that's called the Organic Integrity Database. And so the Organic Integrity Database is a place where every single operation that is certified organic to the USDA NOP regulation is listed. You will see in that Organic Integrity Database places that are not even in the US, but because of need for equivalency, if you want to buy a banana that comes from not the US, obviously, but is certified organic, then need to have that certification carry over from the country of origin into the US. And so that operation will be listed there as well. So this is public information. Once your farm is certified organic, you will appear in the organic integrity database. It's just a spreadsheet, so it's kind of hard to navigate. So on our website, we decided to create that organic farm search tool where we pull information from the organic integrity database through public available information and put it on a map that makes it a little easier to like understand who is in your neighborhood and is actually certified organic. And I like to use that to kind of narrow down which certified to choose. So for example, here I had done a search of Aurora, Nebraska, and looked around to see who is certified organic in the area. And at the bottom, there will be a table that shows who is certifying them. So the first thing I would like to do is go to the organic farm search tool, enter your location, put like a 30-50 mile radius, depending on how concentrated organic farms are in your area, and then look for places that have the same scope. So scopes are crop, livestock handling. So if you're a corn farmer, for example, you're going to look for somebody who is certifying crops, but not only crops, but who is also certifying corn, soybean, wheat, which are the crops you're probably going to be growing. So looking for a certifier that's certifying in your area, first of all, is going to make it cheaper because the inspector is going to come for you, but it's going to come from somebody else too. So its fees are going to be a little cheaper because they're going to be a little bit split between you and the other farmer they're visiting on the same day or on the same trip. That's the number one consideration that I use in general, is who is already coming to my area and doing the type of farm that I'm doing. If you're doing like grain, usually it's not an issue, but if you're doing something more specific, like mushrooms, for example, you would want to have a certifier that has the experience and an inspector in the area that has experience with it. And then the other thing, once you've narrowed down that list, let's say you use the map like that, and there are like 5 certifiers in the area that are working with farmers. So like, how do I go down to like the one that I'm going to work with? I would say you just call them all and you see how responsive they are, how good you feel when you talk to them. It's going to be a pretty intimate relationship with that certifier and the inspectors that is sent to your farm. They're going to come and look into your books. It can feel a little intrusive, so you want to be with somebody who you feel is responsive, respectful, that you actually have a good relationship with. So I think the relationship aspect is pretty important in choosing a certifier as well. Then you can look into other services offered. So for example, some certifiers offer some support during the transition years, some do not. And then your preferred structure, if it's state-based, for-profit, nonprofit, this is all personal choices. Application and fee. So as I say, usually they don't vary too much from certifier to certifier. Here I'm using the Colorado Department of Ag as an example. And again, this is not an endorsement. It's just random. Every time I give that presentation, I change the certifier fee that I'm using. So today it's going to be Colorado Department of Ag. So you can see how the fee is structured, but first I want to say it's good to submit your application 45 months ahead of your expected harvest. So let's go over some things first. So the organic transition is a 36 months process. And by 36 months, I mean it is 36 months between the last application of a prohibited substance. That would be a mineral nitrogen, that would be a chemical, pesticide, insecticide, fungicide, and the harvest of the first crop that you can certify organic. So the harvest of that crop is what I'm talking about here when I say submit the application 45 months ahead of expected harvest. So again, now, let's say in 2023, I sprayed fungicide in my corn in the summer. So 36 months from that application, I will be able to harvest an organic crop. It doesn't matter when the crop is planted. If the crop is planted before that 36 months mark, it's fine as long as it's harvested after the 36 months mark. So you want to submit an application again 45 months before the harvest time. Going again through back to the fee structure here, application fee. You can see crop application fee. So this is just like a one-time application to enter the certifiers network, I guess. So this is here $500. Then you have any additional scope. So if you're doing anything else that's not crop, you have livestock on your farm, you're handling. So that means you're like transforming anything, any kind of agricultural product into like an end product, which is pretty rare, I would say, for grain farmers. And in section 3, you can see here they differentiate between irrigated acres, dryland acre, perennial fruit. This is very specific to Western states. You wouldn't see that in the non-irrigated Midwest states. So here you can see for this, the fee will be $1,500 roughly, but that does not include the inspector fee. So inspection fee is something that you have to add on top of this here. So here is just like the applications. This is how they're going to pay for themselves, reviewing your paperwork when you submit it, reviewing the inspector's review, so on and so forth. And this is for the inspector to actually come to your farm, write the report, submit it to the certifier. And those are kind of variable fees, as I was referring to earlier. That's why it's nice to like pick a certifier that already works in your area, because then the inspector will spend time for you, but also for another farmer, and that will be shared. So again, those are variable. You can see like there are some rules here. You can always ask the certifier how much that's going to be, but roughly we're talking about maybe $2,000 for the organic certification costs per year. Now on to some good news. Okay, $2,000, that sounds a little intimidating depending on the size of your operation. So there is a program that's called the Organic Certification Cost Share Program that's administered by the USDA. And certified operation may receive up to 75% of their certification cost paid during the program year, not to exceed $750 per certification scope. So that's a must. That's the easiest, most straightforward. I still recognize that you have to pay ahead of time, that you have to pay the certification cost, and then it reimburses you. It's not, you still have to like have the money on hand to pay for the certification, but it's still a good $750 rebate that you can get. Those are like older application deadline, usually in November, October of the year. You have to apply for it if you want to get it. Other ways to get some of the money of your certification back, or to help with some of the transition cost. I'm not going to go into the details of what transition can cost economically, but it can be kind of a financial hurdle because you're learning, you might not get the same yields, you might not get the same revenue per acre. So there are some programs that also account for that and help you during the transition, not only with the certification cost, but with like a per acre support. And this is a new practice. I'm saying this now. It is November 2023, and this program enrolled in 2023. So it existed. USDA and RCS 823 interim practice was open for farmers to enroll into in the year of 2023. I'm not sure if it's going to be available in 2024. I sure hope it will be, because it's a really great program where one can get about $200 per acre for transitioning acre of row crop production, if we're talking about row crop here. In 2023, the deadline was June 15th. So think about it, just ask your USDA NRCS office. With those practices that are not broadly used, organic is still very much a minority in agriculture. So you really kind of have to like show up to your FSA office and ask for that specific practice and how you can enroll in it. Sometimes the NRCS agent will not be aware of it, but if you ask them, they will look for it and they will find it, because it exists in most states at this point. So look into this one. It's a really good way to like help the little economic or hurdle that you will be going through during transition. Another thing that can be used that has been here for much longer and is a great program is the field border program. So we haven't talked about borders and how they're important in organic certification and organic production. So borders are the buffers zone around your field that make sure that any contamination from the neighboring farm or the neighboring road maintenance is not going to come and contaminate the crop that you're growing organically. there is no set width of the border in the organic roles. So it is up to the certifying body, certifying agency to come and tell you how much you need on your specific farm, on that specific side of your field. The prevailing wind, what is happening on the other side are going to be all things that are going to matter in how wide they want it to be. In general, I like to say 30 feet wide is pretty conservative. In most cases, 30 feet wide is going to be good. In a lot of cases, it's going to be overkill. In a minority of cases, it's going to be not enough. But I would say aiming for that is good. But when you don't know, if you're not sure, the best thing to do is to call your certifier. They're the people who are going to make the decision. They're the people who know the rules the best. And they're the people to call if you have any question about a product, a practice, or anything regarding your specific farm. So the field borders, again, as I was describing, you could put them, instead of cropping them and harvesting them as conventional, you could put them in a more permanent cover. And NRCS has also a program that will cover that. It's a one-time payment. This is a quote from a farmer in Nebraska, for example. It was a one-time payment of $430 per acre. He had to buy $70 of seed per acre, and it was a one-year contract. So he could terminate it whenever he wanted and got 430 minus 70 of the seed cost. So a good way to kind of pay for the loss of income that you would get from not farming those field borders, and make it a peace of mind so you don't have to bother with them, and with remembering to separate the crops that are growing in the border and the crops that are growing inside the field. Okay, let's kind of switch gear here and stop talking about the rules, but kind of start talking on, well, let's yeah. We'll pause. We're saying, okay, let's finish the rule part with the organic inspection. So we've talked about it a little bit already. Once you've applied, your certifying agent will schedule an inspection, and the inspector will come and will tour the farm again to make sure that what you have put in your OSP, organic system plan, is what you have in place on the farm. That's the only goal of the inspection. There is no there is no other overarching goal of it. It can be, again, very intimidating. Somebody's coming, looking into your books, making sure you're doing what you said you're doing. But there's really no stress to be had if you are actually doing what you said you would do. So it typically lasts 2 to 4 hours, depending on the side of the operation and how complex your cropping systems are. I think 2 to 4 is pretty standard for a classic grain operation that has corn, soybean, wheat, maybe another crop in the rotation. It occurs annually after the initial certification. So every year the inspector is going to come back. And then you will receive, hopefully, your beautiful organic certificate. This is an example of another certifier where fruit comes from here. And so you as a producer will be sent a notification that you have been approved, and that then you can use the organic seal. Or I guess as a grain farmer, you're not going to use the seal yourself. Usually you're going to sell it to a third party, and you can show them your organic certificate so they buy it at the organic price and then know that that crop is organic. In some very rare cases, if there are things that are different from the OSP, there are doubts about the status of your certification, you can be denied and required to reapply. So that happens. It's a very rare case, and it usually means that something has gone wrong. But it's a thing that can happen. That is why the USDA seal is pretty safely states that the product is actually organic. All right, so now it is actually time to get out of the nitty-gritty details of the paperwork and the process of certification. In terms of agronomy, again, we're staying pretty large scale here. What is going to change on the farm? The crop rotation is going to change, obviously. As a conventional farmer, if you're growing grain, maybe you were doing corn on corn, maybe you were doing just corn and soybeans. The regulation in organic states that one has to use a crop rotation that will maintain or improve soil health. So the terms are pretty broad, and it's a lot up to the certifier to describe what they call a crop rotation or what they do not call a crop rotation. In general, having the same crop twice in a row will out you from being able to certify your farm organic, no matter what the crop is. So if you're ever doing corn on corn, that's usually going to be a hard no for the certifier. So that's kind of bigger picture what crop rotation are meant by certifying agencies. There are good things that come with crop rotation. I understand that it can be intimidating to change your crop rotation, to add crops that you've never grown before. But in terms of weed control, fertility, and pest and disease control, it's going to be very important. So it's not only important to like fit the roles, but it's also very important for the sustainability of your system in terms of the 3 bullets that I have here. So in terms of weed control method, prevention through cultural weed control, mechanical weed control such as cultivating, cover crop rolling, mowing, and labor are the only tools left in your toolbox when you're organic. And I will put emphasis here on the prevention through cultural weed control, and that includes rotation and a lot of it. So if you put crops that are more susceptible to some kind of weeds, one after the other, you're going to have a big outbreak of that specific weed. If you change the crop every year, the weed is kind of just not going to know what the world is going to look like every year, and they're going to have a much lower chance of establishing themselves for a very long time. I like to say that in an organic system, you're better off with a very diverse weed population than you are with a very specific weed population. If you only have one weed that's all over the fields, that's usually going to be a problem, and it's usually a sign that your crop rotation is not diverse enough. A healthy organic farms has probably 100 different types of weeds, but they only have one specimen of each of those 100 species of weed. And I think that's a good sign of a great organic farm that has a very diverse crop rotation. Fertility, inputs, and soil amendments, that's going to change as well. And that's also tied to crop rotation. So fertility is going to be mainly manure and cover crop. Manure can be expensive, can be in short supply, can be very far away from your farm. We know that Midwestern farms are very oftentimes pretty far from cattle production. So relying on your crop rotation for that, in addition to any input you might buy, is something that's going to be very important as well. You're going to want to have diverse cover crops in there. You're going to want to have crops that do not need as much nitrogen, for example. If we all think about the Midwest, we think about corn. Corn is a very heavy feeder. So reducing the amount of corn in your rotation is going to reduce your fertility needs, which is going to make it much easier for you to have that sustainable system where you can bring in manure from time to time, but then most of the time you also rely mostly on the cover crop and on the lower feeding crop that you're growing. There are some inputs that are absolutely allowed in organic. So the general rule with inputs in organic production is if it is naturally occurring, it is usually authorized in organic unless specifically written in the rule that you cannot use that naturally occurring substance. If it's a synthetic substance, the general rule is it's not authorized unless it's specifically written in the organic regulation that you can use it. So if you can keep that rule in mind, is it naturally occurring or not? Every time you make a decision, then it makes it a little easier to sort it through. But I will repeat it again. If you have any doubt about any product you're wanting to use, call your certifier. They're going to be the one who decide whether you can use it or not. You're going to have to add it to your organic system plan anyway, because they need to know every single product you use on your farm. So just call them, make sure you run it by them, that it's good to go if there is any doubt that the substance in the product cannot be used in organic. Same for like pest and disease control. There are some pest and disease control products, inputs that are authorized in organic. Same thinking mechanism, synthetic or non-synthetic, naturally occurring. In any doubt, call your certifier. But generally, focusing on prevention is the best. So again, back to your crop rotation, the more diverse the crop rotation, the lower the potential pest and disease pressure. You have to think about not only diversity, but I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have soybean and sunflower. They're diverse, they're very different crops, but they're also both very susceptible to white mold, for example, which can be a big problem in organic systems, especially in large scale organic operation, because the products that are approved in organic are usually very expensive, and they're really applicable at small scale, high value crop like vegetable orchards, for example. But for grain farm, most of the time they don't make sense. So you really don't want the disease to arrive, because you're usually not going to be able to financially make it worth to use a product to fight the disease. So make sure it doesn't happen. Crop rotation, again, making sure that you know the disease susceptibility of each of the crop that you're using. Genetics of the crop is going to be very important. You're going to have to look at the catalog and make sure that they're resistant to some extent to the disease that are in your area. Moving to the next big things that are going to change on your farm. The labor needs, that's something that sometimes farmers tend to not think about. You're not going to be able to manage as many acres by yourself as you were able to as a conventional farmer, especially during the weed control season. As everybody knows, you can see here on the left a photo of a rotary hoe. Mechanical weed control is a very big part of organic weed control, and it takes a lot of time. So during that time crunch of the May, June, July timeframe, when you're doing a lot of mechanical weed control, it may take up to twice as many hours per acre as growing the crops conventionally, and maybe even higher during that specific period. So the twice as many hours is in general during the whole growing season. So something to really keep in mind as you're transitioning your farm to organic, how fast you want to transition your acres, and then how you're going to deal with labor needs once you get to the point where you cannot do it by yourself. The yields are going to be different. I think I would be lying if I say that the yields of organic and conventional are always equal. There are lots of studies that show that they can be very close, but those are more like national averages. So you can see the source here is the Finbin data, which is a database in the Midwest, and those are 2020, 2021 data. So those are real farm reporting their real yields. What they found is that on average, the corn yields are 69% of the conventional yield. So that means 30% less. Soybeans are 73% of conventional, wheat 66%. So here you can see a 30% yield decrease in those three main crops. But then hay remains a little higher than that. So just a 20% decrease. That means they're 81% of the conventional yields. But, and I don't have the graph here, I don't think, the prices, the prices are much higher. And usually the difference in price is higher than the difference in yield. So in return on investment per acre, organic is more profitable for grain production than conventional is. So you really have to again, change your frame of thought and really take a step back every time and look at the bigger picture. And usually, if you look at the bigger picture, you will see that organic has an advantage over conventional production. The big flaw here in that system is the cash flow, especially during transition years. I was alluding to it when I was talking about the cost share programs and all those programs that can support you during those transition. And that's why I advocate for never transitioning more than 10% of your acreage at the time. So you will go very slowly. Transitioning your entire farm overnight, I don't think is a great economic strategy unless you have a lot of cash flow that you can inject in your farm during those 3 years, because the net return per acre can drop all the way to $0 per acre during the transition year. Usually it will just come back to what it was before, twice what it was before, 3 times what it was before, right after when you have your organic certificate. But during those 36 months, usually 2 harvests, it might be a little tight. So 10% at a time, I think, is a good rule of thumb. Don't transition the entire farm all at once. Record keeping is something that farmers are not necessarily very inclined to do. If I was a farmer, I would just want to be in the tractor all the time. I would want to be in the shed all the time. I wouldn't want to be in my office and fill out paperwork and report and keep track of every single thing that I do. In organic, you kind of have to kind of write down what you're doing. So again, so your certifier can know that you're doing what you say you're doing. So you have to maintain and show integrity, the seed, the inputs, the harvest, and equipment cleanup as necessary. So for example, if you are transitioning your acres slowly, you still have some conventional and some organic acres. When you go between those two acres, you don't want to bring materials, plant materials, from one field to the other. So you will have to thoroughly clean up the equipment that you're using on both fields. That includes the combine, which can be a hurdle. There are a bunch of resources, videos available that show you how to actually clean up a combine very fully, so there is no seed that's stuck anywhere in the combine that might contaminate your organic harvest. And you have to keep track of that. But that doesn't mean that you have to like take an extensive video of how you did it when you did it. You take a few photos, you take a few notes, you write it on your calendar. What's good now is that every photo we take has a timestamp on it. So I think that's the best way to keep records. Is in the busy season, it's hard to like go back to the office and write everything that you did that day. If you snap a photo of everything you did that day, in the lower, not in the off season, I would say, you can just go back through your photos and just make note of when did I clean the combine, when did I plant the rye, when did I plant the corn, and so on and so forth. So record keeping has been made much easier now than it was 10 years ago, because certifiers are have online platforms to enter everything, and because we have phones that track everything we do all the time, which can be a bad thing, but can be a really great thing. Equipment is going to change. So buying your equipment is also something that's going to have to be gradual. So just like transitioning 10% of your acreage at the time, you're not going to buy that full list of equipment right away. There are things that you're going to need right away. You're going to need a rotary hoe. You're going to need a row cultivator. That's what I usually recommend farmers to start with if they're going to go row crop organic grain. So again, rotary hoe, row cultivator are the biggest things that I would encourage farmers to buy right away. And then year after year, as you're getting more and more organic acres, as you're fine-tuning your weed control and your practices, then you can add to your toolbox. The tine weeder is an amazing addition to your toolbox. A roller crimper if you want to try some organic no-till, flame weeder, weed zapper. All of those are really great tools to have, but I wouldn't say jump on them in the first year. Those are big investments that you might be better off doing at a later time. And cleaning and storage. Oftentimes, you will have to go a little further, wait a little longer to deliver your grain. The closest elevator may not take the grain that's organic like you used to. You just drive to the closest elevator, you dump your grain, and that's it. It's pretty easy, straightforward process. While the closest organic elevator might be more than 20, 50 miles away, depending on where you are. And in that case, you might need to store on farm and deliver when you can or when they can take it. So cleaning and storage go together. I don't think you can really store without cleaning because of storage issues. So cleaning a little bit, minimal amount of cleaning, and then storage are things that are really worth investing in as you're going to organic production. Again, maybe not in the first years because you're transitioning, your crops are not certified anyway, but something to really have in your roadmap as you're planning your business in the future and your organic farm and organic transition. And that's it. That's all I had for today on the part that's more the administrative part of the organic certification and more like the on-farm, the biggest change that you're going to see. So now I'm going to talk a little about what it means to be a Rodale organic consultant and how you can have somebody like me, somebody on our team to help you go through that process. Somebody who's gone through it with other farmers who knows the main culprits, the main pitfalls of the organic transition and organic certification. So we offer all the services. I'm not going to read through all of them. As you're watching it, as it's recorded, you can pause and read all the services, or you can just get in touch with us. So if you call our main consulting line, you will be put in touch with the consultant that is the most relevant to your geographic area or the type of production that you have. So here are every story that you see here on the map is a consultant on our team. So we're across the country at this point. Since this webinar is more Nebraska center, Midwest center, you can see that there are quite a lot of stars here. We have quite a few people in the Midwest. In the Northeast, there is only one star, but it's actually 4 people that are based in Pennsylvania, which is where Rodale's headquarters is located. But we also have people in the Pacific and in the Southeast. So don't hesitate if you are interested in transitioning to organic, whether your farm is a grain farm, a vegetable farm, a cattle farm, no matter where you're located in the continental United States, give us a call and then you will be put in touch with, again, the person who is the closest to you and or the person who has the expertise that you need for the specific type of production that you're trying to do. If you have any question, feel free to contact me directly. So this is my email and my cell. You can call, text, email me at any time with any question regarding our program or regarding the information that I provided in this webinar or anything that relates to organic. Thank you for your attention.